A couple videos back, we started talking about a few reasons that Christians, motivated by their faith, might think that they need to stay out of the public square. Today, I want to talk about the opposite mistake. We're just going to talk about one reason that Christians can start to think that if we're going to get involved in politics, then our goal has to be taking over the government and reshaping it into our own image. My name is Rick. I'm part of the Center for Christian Civics, and on this channel, we talk about ways that the Christian faith can equip us to think, speak, and act differently in the public square. If that's the kind of content that seems important to you or timely for some reason, then do all the normal YouTube things. Subscribe, hit the bell, all that fun stuff to make sure that you don't miss out. Now, another way of describing the impulse we're talking about today might be to call it promised land thinking. The idea that we have a right to live in a place that is ordered according to our faith, and so anything we do to set one up is justified. And there are a few different ways Christians in the US can end up adopting this posture, but today I just want to talk about one: believing that America has a unique place in God's work in the world. This is an idea that has a long history. It was right there in the rhetoric that encouraged the pilgrims to get onto the ships that brought them to this continent in the first place. Winthrop's famous City on a Hill sermon traded in imagery of America as the new Israel, and it made the people who were traveling here feel like they had a new, unique place in God's work in the world. But Winthrop wasn't the only colonial-era Christian influencer to talk like this, and the colonial era wasn't the last time that we'd hear it. That kind of language, that kind of allusion to America being the new Israel, having some kind of special place in God's story that other countries don't, comes up over and over again in American politics. It got even more prevalent during the Cold War, when it became a convenient way to differentiate the American brand from the Soviet brand. They're the atheistic communists, we're the godly capitalists. They're the force of darkness, we're the shining city on a hill. Yeah, 350 years after Winthrop used Jesus' city on a hill metaphor to describe coming to America, President Reagan used it to describe America's role in geopolitical and military history. And then that way of thinking and talking got another shot in the arm after 9/11, and even when it isn't being said outright, this idea that the US has a special role to play in the world as far as God is concerned is still an undercurrent in a lot of our political speeches and even in some of our preaching. And let's be honest, that makes sense because it's great messaging. It gets people excited. It makes us feel like we're in on some kind of bigger mission together. It gets us committed. But it's borderline illiterate theology. Dr. Vince Baycoat, who's on our advisory council, put it really well when he said that if you want to find America in Scripture, you have to look only in the verses that address all the nations. Scripture says that on this side of the cross, God has people set apart for himself from every nation, within every nation. It doesn't say that God is calling his people from around the world to a specific earthly kingdom or to ally with a specific earthly kingdom, or that the heavenly kingdom is going to enter this world through an earthly kingdom. Christians don't get to derive spiritual or existential pride from what country we live in. When God's throne arrives, Revelation 4 tells us that the kings of this world will bring their crowns to him and put them down at his feet, together, as peers. Every nation's glory is going to be less than God's glory, and less than it in pretty much equal ways. There's a lot in our history and in our culture in the United States that's worth repenting of, just like every other country. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to see clearly and powerfully condemned when the kingdom comes and every secret is revealed. But those crowns that get laid at Jesus' feet, he will accept them. There will be some things about every culture that do end up getting praised when the kingdom comes, that end up enduring, albeit in a perfected and glorified way. And I would argue that one of those good things about life in America today also gives those of us here who are Christian an opportunity that most other Christians throughout church history haven't really had. It's not something that gives America special dispensation to lead other nations spiritually or anything like that, but it is something that Christians should think is worth celebrating and taking advantage of. It's how America deals, or at least tries to deal, with the authority, identity, and legitimacy of the state. Most Christians throughout most of church history have practiced their faith in countries where the identity of the state comes from either a specific individual exercising their will to power or their economic power to hold disparate groups of people together, or else where the identity of the state comes from some kind of shared ethnic, tribal, familial, or cultural history. To some degree, even constitutional monarchies, or monarchies that have become democracies over time, still look at themselves that way. It's why some European countries have had such a hard time figuring out how to welcome immigrants and refugees over the last couple of decades. But the US is set up deliberately to be a people bound together by an idea, not an ethnic or tribal identity, and not by dedication to a specific individual or family. For Christians, for people who know that we are heading toward a kingdom where people from every tribe, who speak every tongue, will be standing shoulder to shoulder and gladly sharing a table together, being in a situation like this, being in a nation of immigrants bound together as peers, is a really great chance to get a taste of what every tribe and tongue really means. We have a chance here to practice being a community that can welcome people from every tribe without demanding that they all speak the same cultural tongue. The resources to do that are there in the gospel, and we have space to flex them here in the US that a lot of our brothers and sisters throughout church history have never had. That's not something that gives Christians here the freedom to unilaterally create a new national covenant with God or anything like that, but it is something about life here that reflects the Bible's promises. And so I think it's something worth being grateful for, and I really do think it's something that we're going to see somehow glorified when the kingdom comes.